All right, Ahmed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
How are
you
you
for
doing
having me.
today? How
I'm
are
doing
you?
well. I'm doing
You doing
well.
well? Alhamdulillah. Okay, so I know that you are a real estate agent. You do budgeting for the mayor's office, I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you do a couple other stuff, book writing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a
Exactly.
lot of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a bit more about what you do daily.
Right. So my main job is I'm a budget analyst for the education department on the mayor's office. So I manage the capital budget of the entire education sector. That's somewhere around 300 billion. So something around that. So my main thing is I budget the amount of capital that can be spent on rebuilding school buildings. So there are some school buildings that need solar panels or new boiler or any of those things. These projects can go from the range of anything between 10 million to 100 million. So, they're big projects, and my job is to make sure that, the capital budget remains in a certain place and the approval of these contracts. The other thing I do is I'm a real estate agent. I work for some investment companies that are essentially investing $2 to $3 million in the market at all times. And
So it's like a fund kind of thing.
yeah, it's a fund. It's within one LLC or a few corporations, whatever, and they're set up to find houses that are undervalued. So I find these undervalued houses, they buy it up, they fix it up, and then they sell it. And so that's the other part of my job. And I also am writing a book about the 1971 Liberation War. It's a novel, and I think my main focus when I was thinking about writing that book was because I love literature. I love reading about philosophy, and I enjoy movies, real film. And I think the 1971 war, even Bengalis who grew up with grandparents or uncles who fought in that war, know very little about the history of that war. And I think I wanted to bring it to, I guess, like the entire
Shed
audience.
some light
yeah.
in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you bring a lot to the plate today. Okay, so let's start off with speaking about real estate.
Right.
Because like real estate is something that obviously as a person who lives in an apartment, I know that after COVID hit, a lot of people, they just moved out of New York City. They were
Right.
like, I want to buy houses in Buffalo, Boston,
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
There's like plenty of spaces out there, and I know a lot of real estate people who are in real estate. They're brokers, like stuff.
Right.
And then also I know people who do stock market trading and everything
Right.
like that. But what is something that you do in real estate? What
Right.
is it like?
So I guess the most important thing, most of the people who are buying real estate from, a South Asian immigrant household, their first focus is obviously buying in New York City. So they lived here for so many years and they saved up their money, and they're like, okay, let's buy a house in New York City. They come to the market and they look at houses on Hillside, for example, or they look at houses in Parkchester or houses in parts of Brooklyn, right? And they see these prices and they're kind of outrageous, right?
Yeah, it's like in the millions and like hundred
to
thousands.
a million. And then when you have houses that are around like 600-700, they're not in great condition or they're very small. And so people are looking outwards. They're looking at places like Binghamton, Buffalo. Even I know a lot of people who are moving to Texas,
That's true. Yeah.
Michigan. So they're moving to these places because, they get a house. I remember during COVID, houses in Binghamton were only $120,000, $150,000. And so people are
that's not
moving
much.
there to basically capture the market. But there are pros and cons, right? People who live in New York City have access to having higher income, right? If you imagine most of the immigrant families that we know are either drive Uber, Yellow, or Lyft, right? So they drive a
majority,
cab,
yeah.
basically, right? An Uber driver and a taxi cab driver can make around $100,000 in a year, right? That's not considering how much cost they get into taxes and all that, right? And they're able to make that much money because it is New York City. Everybody makes a little more money. But when you go upstate, when you go to a different state, the dynamics change. In Binghamton, it's mainly a bunch of factories, and that's where people make their money, right? But at the same time, they don't have access to white-collar jobs. So
What is white collar jobs?
so a white-collar job is basically, when we go to school and everything, right? We go inside, and I guess the whole mentality of a white collar job is basically you go into an office and you work there, right? It's very different from a blue collar job or a factory job or a cab driving job, right? It's very different. It's more physical labor.
Yeah.
White collar job is very much more, I guess, mental. You know, it's in your head. It's what you can do with an Excel sheet. And the thing is, these, there's a lot more blue collar jobs, right? But less of the white collar jobs. So if you are 45, 50 and you're a Bengali man, it's okay doing those jobs. But for your kids, they have a lot less access to doing white collar jobs that pay well, right? But at the same time, the housing, the cost, expenses are a lot less. You can buy a really nice house for $200-300, right? The same house would cost in New York City maybe 1.5. And
so you're saying that there's always a trade-off to whatever you do. So
exactly.
Like,
right. So you have to take a measured approach. You have to always think 20 years ahead. What's going to happen, right? And I think a lot of people did not think 20 years ahead, and we can see that in the financial crisis. In the financial crisis, I'll talk about from my personal standpoint as a young man. When my dad owned a house, and it was a 2-family, and he loses the house during the financial crisis, right? Because a lot of people of his time were basically, they came to a point where they didn't understand the loans that they were taking. So there's 2 types of loans. There's a subprime loan and a prime loan, right? So a prime loan is a fixed rate. So let's say you pay 2.75% or 5.5% over the 30-year period, and that's fixed. It never changes.
yeah.
If you take it today, it won't change in 30 years, the entire length of that loan, which is great. You know what you're paying for. You know that your monthly mortgage is going to be the same as it was yesterday and tomorrow. That's great. But what happened was the invention of subprime loans. Subprime loans, or adjustable rate mortgages, they call them ARMs, are essentially loans where you get a teaser rate. In the beginning, it's a really nice, very low rate. But because people didn't have good credit score or whatever reason, that rate can adjust based on the market. It'll bump up.
So if, for example, I take a loan right now, and I get like, obviously you cannot get this rate, but like
Right.
0.5% APR.
Yeah.
But then in like 10 years, I could, if I didn't pay off the
Yeah.
loan yet,
Yeah.
I could be paying like 10% or like
Yeah,
20%.
yeah, exactly. It's based on the market. It's based on LIBOR, and so it's because it's changing, right? All of a sudden, because people think that they're paying low rates right now because the market is good, because the Fed didn't increase the interest rates. Everything
yeah,
is
I think
fine.
I was reading
Right.
articles and everything. Like they were like saying that there's like a lot of problems with the interest rates. Like the federal might be increasing
Right.
interest rates because like
Right.
because of the crisis in Israel and Palestine
Yeah.
and Turkey, not Turkey, what am I saying? Ukraine,
Yeah.
Russia, and also like the oil
Right.
rates.
Right.
I think like all that kind of contributes to
The interest rates moving up and down. But this is the thing, right? When you buy a 30-year loan, and a lot of these people saw these rates being low, and not only did they have an adjustable rate mortgage, right, a subprime loan, right, the brokers who were essentially handing out these loans, right, the loan officers, mortgage officers, they saw that on a fixed rate loan, they make less money on a fixed rate than they do on a subprime.
So it's like a commission kind of thing.
It's a commission kind of thing. Loan officers make their bread from selling you loans. The more loans they sell, the more money they make. So it's in their own initiative to sell more loans. It doesn't matter. Back then they used to sell something called ninja loans. No income, no job, no verification, no credit score.
So you don't need any type of
Right,
authentication,
right.
but
This
you
is
just get a loan.
pre-2007, right? Anybody can get a home, right? And then they preyed on people who had less knowledge about the market, about how loans really work, how interest really works, and they were like, okay, sign here,
So
you get a house.
financially illiterate people are
Right.
the ones who are targets.
Exactly,
I think
targeted.
like Mark Tilbury, I don't know if you know him. He discusses a lot about how he talks about how he went from being this guy who was in debt.
Yeah,
I think it was like $50,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And this is like in the 90s, so like
yeah,
that 50,000 was like hella money
Right.
at that time. So he said that he went to buy a car after getting this nice job in a factory or somewhere, and the guy who was a the loan person
Officer,
who
yeah.
the loan officer is a person who he was like, okay, so I'll give you a $50,000 loan, and then he said that the guy was nice enough to give him more extra money to buy add-ons to the car,
Right.
and then later on, right, he also got this store credit card thing
Yeah.
where it also added up to a lot of debt
Yeah.
with interest.
Right.
And he said that after a while he realized that even though he was paying back the interest and everything, like
Yeah.
everything, he still had the same amount of money from the first day.
Right, exactly, because it's compounded interest, right?
Yeah.
When you're compounding the interest, right? Let's say you buy $1 million house today, the bank, you end up paying the bank not only the million, but more than $1 million. So they get back maybe like off my head, like maybe 1.8, right? So they make that profit. The interest is the profit, right?
And he said that also, like, you had to pay off the highest interest rate, because the highest interest, I think the highest interest rate is the one that bites the most.
Bites the most, exactly. The thing I would advise people is don't go into a place where you have to pay interest, right? Like, the whole thing is, like, the adjustable rate mortgage, what was bad about it is that the interest rate can jump tomorrow, right? And then instead of paying what you're used to, a $300 mortgage payment, let's say, right, can jump to anywhere between $1,000, more than that, who knows, right? And what happened is people started defaulting on their loans. And what's amazing, or what's like outrageously disgusting, is that everybody, all the banks, thought that, oh, everybody who doesn't pay their mortgage, who doesn't pay their mortgage. But what happened? Everybody started defaulting because they realized they couldn't afford it. And so they started defaulting, and we saw.
What is defaulting?
So defaulting is when you stop paying your mortgage, when you can't afford it, right?
So what happens when that? Like, do you file bankruptcy?
You file, so you can file bankruptcy, right? That's one thing. But also, inevitably, what happens is that the bank forecloses on your house. The bank goes to the court and says, hey, this guy is not paying me for their house, right? And the bank takes your house from you, sells it, and they recoup as much money back for their loan to pay it back, right? So let's say you put down $200,000, your life savings, you worked 20 years for that money, and you buy a house and you default on your payments because you can't afford the mortgage payments, you lose your house, right? But you also lose the $200,000. You don't get that back.
Yeah.
Because it has to pay the lien. The lien is the loan on the house. It has to pay it first, and whatever money is left, which in most cases, there is no money left, right?
Yeah.
Because foreclosed houses go for cheaper, always, right? It's like on a short sale, right?
So, like, is it better? So, how do you access the foreclosure market?
Right. So the foreclosure market is actually, publicly available. Anybody can access the foreclosure market. The thing about foreclosures is that you can only usually about 95% of the time, the only way that you can buy a foreclosed house is through a full cash deal. So
Full cash deal.
Full cash deal. So this is what I kind of do with my the people who I work for, right? They are basically seeing, let's say a house is $800,000 value, right? When a bank takes a foreclosed home, their main thing is that they want to get that house off their hands as quick as possible. How do they do that? They lower the price, right? So they, instead of selling an $800,000 house for $800,000, they sell it for $400,000, 50% off sometimes, 60% off, right? But the caveat is that you have to give them a full cash deal. You have to give them cash in hand. So only investment groups, right? If a bunch of people come together and they have a lot of money and they can buy it, they can fix it up, and then they can sell it for higher than $800,000 maybe. It's a gamble, but at the same time,
But this is the thing though.
Right.
So why? So this is like very interesting, right?
Right.
You said that foreclosure houses are paid in full cash.
Right.
So let's take one step back, right?
Right.
Would you suggest that when buying houses, is it better to finance or just do one-time settlement price?
Okay, so this is interesting, right? This is where it can get a little nuanced, right? First of all, most people don't have $400,000 laying around, right?
So let's say, for example, like they do, right?
Right?
Let's say, for example, a guy, he works for this one big company. I don't know which company pays that much, but
for
example, they do.
He makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
He has a lot of money saved up, and he consistently brings in income per month, right?
Yeah.
Should he buy a house with cash, or should he buy it with a loan, right? That depends on the interest rate. If the interest rate is 2.75%, as it was during COVID, right? And we know that the inflation rate of the dollar is 7%. You make money if you just do the 2.75, right? Why would I do that? Okay, I'm making a lot of money per year, and I have cash laying around. If I put it on loan, right, the cash that I don't use to buy the house, let's say I only put 100 down and the rest is on loan, that rest of the money I can use it for investments. People can put it into the stock market, or they can buy more real estate, rent it out. They can make money like that. The whole point when you are buying and selling real estate is that you're beating the inflation rate. The inflation rate is whatever given interest rate on a 10-year bond for the U.S.
What
government.
if you don't want to deal with interest rates?
And if you don't want to deal with the interest rate, let's say you're a Muslim and you don't want to get into riba or interest, right? Then I absolutely believe you should buy cash. You should avoid loans.
How do you do that though?
So obviously the thing is you have to save up money. If you can save up $400,000, then yes. But the other thing is that foreclosed homes, about 50% of the time, maybe 60% of the time, are not in great condition. The walls are falling apart, everything is falling apart. That's why investors take on these houses and they invest maybe $100,000 into it, $150,000 into it, and they fix it up and they sell it to you.
So in a sense, it's easier kind of thing in a way that if I were to buy a house right now, right? Let's say for example, my income, I have 100,000 saved up in my bank account, and my income is like an average income in New York City for starting off as a 20-year-old, I believe, is in the 80s to 90s.
Right.
For a good job, obviously.
Right, obviously.
So let's say, for example, I make 80K per year, and somehow I did some side hustles and everything in my teens, and then I made $100,000, and I have saved it up in my bank account, right?
Right.
And I don't take any interest from that. All I am doing is I don't have anything saved up in my stock market. There's no stock market, nothing of that. And I'm making 80K per year, minus tax, obviously, which is like, let's say, for example, 75K.
Right.
Because obviously, tax budget pretty much. So what would you suggest is the best idea to go now? Because I want to buy a house now in New York City.
Right. So if you have only 100K saved up, you're not going to be able to buy a house, right? Without, you have to put a down payment. That's going to be your down payment. It is not going to be like you can't buy an outright house without a loan with only 100K. And, that's the issue that people run into. Now, the thing is that if you're going to buy with an interest loan, I strongly suggest you get a fixed rate. Don't get a subprime loan. It is the worst thing in the world.
So what about halal loans?
Halal loans. Now, this is an interesting, every scholar has their own sort of outlook on halal loans. Personally, I went to Baruch for finance, and from my knowledge of loans, a halal loan isn't really halal. You know what? So this is how a halal loan basically works from what I know about it. They essentially say that instead of paying a fixed rate interest, you're not paying interest, you're paying for profit. So somebody buys a house with you. Let's say you put $200,000 down. The house is $1 million.
It's like a copay kind of thing.
It's like a copay type of thing. And the person's like, the person is basically like, I'm lending you $800 and you pay me a fixed amount of cash per month. And they call that rate, a percentage, a service fee. So a service fee for lending you cash.
So basically they just change the terminology.
They change the word,
around.
right? My thing is our God, is Allah, like, does he not know the knowledge of loopholes? It's like, when you go to a lawyer, they find you loopholes to this. I think a halal loan is indiscriminately a way of finding loopholes for people, right? They label it halal, right? Like if you can't take a pig and slaughter it and say Bismillah and make it halal. It's never going to happen. An interest rate is an interest rate. Whether you call it a service fee, a borrowing fee, or this fee or that fee. It's always going to be an interest rate. If it's compounded over a year, and let's say the final amount that you pay that person is the same amount you pay the bank, maybe even more. They probably charge a higher amount because they say it's halal.
I mean,
halal is more expensive, whatever.
At the end of the day, it's like if you want to, the way that lending systems work in Islam is basically, I borrow $100 from you right now.
Right.
even if it's 10 years or 15 years from now,
Right.
it's the same $100 I give you, or some exact same value
Right.
of
Or
that
the
100
inflation value, just the
of the
inflation
inflation value, right?
Exactly.
But if you're asking or demanding anything
Any cars
or
right, exactly.
even a cent over
right.
that, then that's just
It's just interest. It's just interest, right? It's
Yeah.
just interest. As simple as that. And I think people, the reason why they want halal loans to be halal, like in their head, I want this to be real. You know why? Because it's greed, right? Do we really need a fancy big house? Do we need a house? How many people can survive just living in an apartment? I know it's not great to live in an apartment. I've lived in an apartment. I know how it is. It does not feel great to live in one, but that doesn't mean that listen, you have a choice between either choosing God or choosing greed, And Shaitan's going to get in your ear and he's going to tell you, hey, it's okay to take a halal loan. It's okay to pay the interest. It's okay to charge someone interest and make your money.
That's true.
And in the same ears, right, they're going to tell the agents, right, it's okay to tell people that this house is fine and that they can afford it, even though they can't, right? I'm the person giving a loan. I know what a person can afford or not afford. Yet I tell these people that they can afford it, even though they can't. And then a year or 2 years from now, they saved up so many years of cash, right, to buy a house. And then all of a sudden you knew that they couldn't pay that interest rate and you gave it to them. And they lose the house.
Going back to certain things, right? You said that you work at Department of Education,
right,
as a finance person.
I work for the mayor's office, yeah.
Mayor's office, right? So you don't know, getting out of school, like a high schooler,
right,
you didn't know anything about finance. You had to go to college to learn anything about finance, right?
Right.
So that's financial literacy knowledge that basically no one outside of high school gets, right? So that's one. A guy who does not go to business school and learns finance or economics, or business or any of such, right? If he's a doctor, then he has no knowledge of money.
Right.
Sure, he makes a lot of money, like a doctor makes, it's a high-paying job.
Right.
But he is not going to know about money. Right. So do you think that idea of not teaching financial literacy in schools and people being illiterate when it comes to finance is a big problem?
It's definitely a big problem. It's definitely a big problem because we don't understand. In school, they don't teach us how to save money, right? In school, they don't teach us about how a loan system works. How does compounding interest work? How do we even file our taxes? Like, they don't even teach us. So many people, they go to a tax attorney and they don't know what's actually going on, right?
I heard a funny story in a podcast, right? This millionaire, she explains how people don't give a fuck about their biggest income problem.
Yeah.
Like their biggest income bite is tax.
Right.
And they spend literally let's say 5 minutes in it. Or even though they should be realistically spending a lot more time in it because that's the biggest income, that's the biggest expense that they have.
Right. So the thing is, right, obviously the person who's doing your taxes knows more about taxes than you ever could, right?
Yeah.
I worked at a tax firm for nearly a year, right? I was doing taxes for hedge funds and private equity companies. So the thing about the taxing system is that it's a very complex system. There's a number of laws, but for the normal Joe who's just working a W-2, he is having no way to go get around taxes. It's just not gonna happen. However, if you're like an LLC, if you're big business, I've seen people where most of their accounts are in the Cayman Islands or here and there, and maybe they can get around, the tax loops. But for the normal person, it's very difficult, maybe even impossible.
I think it is impossible because if you think about it, a lot of Robert Kiyosaki, I can't pronounce his name. The Rich Dad and Poor Dad's author. His when he says that his books, right? When he explains how he does his finance, he says that he has this company, and then he puts the traveling expense, everything like
Yeah.
that, inside that expense. He's like, oh,
Right.
that expense that I did, that $10 I spent is
Yeah.
under that company. So that company is the one that's spending it. I'm not
Right.
spending it.
Right.
So everything is under that one. So I
Exactly.
think like that company idea where
Right. So this is how like that entire thing works, right? Let's say you have an operating company that's getting in income. What they have is they have a number of different shell companies within it. So they have these little baby companies, and they're all situated in a different place depending on the business that you're doing. For example, if you're an oil company and you have this tanker, right? You have this tanker. Is it better to operate in Spain, or is it better to operate in Germany, or is it better to operate in Switzerland? And that's all based on the laws over there. Let's say Switzerland charges you less on your oil income than somewhere else.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a different type of company and selling something else. It's better to establish it in Spain. They will do that. They will get, they will establish the LLC over there.
it's basically having a capital gain.
Yeah. So the entire focus is to like evade taxes, right? And that you can get into like the whole ethics of that. Like should we, like the people who are evading taxes, like who are they evading it from, right? We all live in this one American society, right? And what does our taxes really do, right? At the end of the day, they're educating people that live within our own society, right? Let's say we send our kids to public school, or we send our kids to private school. Every dollar that goes into our taxes is inevitably going into the system, right, that created us, that allows for the laws to protect us, to educate us.
But then there's this loophole again, right? If you're charging me extra,
right,
and then I'm not getting the same education as like someone else,
right?
For example, like a kid who goes to public school versus a private school provides more education than a private public school, maybe, right? But the idea is, if I'm evading taxes, right, I'm not paying that, but I have money to spend to send my school kids to the private schools. And I pay less taxes because of the company and all the capital stuff, right?
Yeah.
But a person who works at 9 to 5 jobs does not have that idea, because he has to pay taxes. He doesn't have anything like that.
Right.
And also his kids cannot go to a private school because of the income that he gets. Because I remember seeing my first paycheck. It was supposed to be around like $300. I got around like $250, $260, $250. That's like a big tax, but for a teenager that works,
it's a 22.5% tax cut.
That's like a pretty big of a tax cut for me. So like, do you think like would I be able to afford anything like that? No. So, what do you think is like the main problem with that though? Like, why?
The main problem with that, it's how the whole economic system kind of works in a capitalist society, right? When I gain a certain amount of money, right? Everybody's gain, your gain of money, whatever you make, is somebody else's loss. Somebody had to give you that money, had to take it out of their account, ownership, and give it to you. So you gained when they lost. And imagine that cycle repeating all over America, all over the world, just constantly happening. He's switching money from here, he's switching money from here, he's switching money from here, right? When that debt cycle occurs, right? The entire bond market of the United States is larger than any amount of cash that we have, right? Everything is based on credit, right? Yeah. So you're buying a house, most people are buying it on credit. You're buying this, you're buying it on credit, right? It's on borrowed money. And that money is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger with inflation, with interest rates and everything, right? What we have to consider is that the entire purpose of taxes, though nobody likes paying them, is to keep people sort of happy, right? So like you said, right? People who have the money can send their kids to private school. People who don't have money have to send their kids to public school. Those public schools run on the money and the budgeting system of the local government and the amount of taxes that they can collect, right? So you can see that in schools and in less impoverished areas are worse than schools in more, expensive and affluent areas.
Let's say, for example, I'm making $1,000 per month, right? then $1,000 per month is like pretty
Right.
OD in my opinion. Kind of let's
Yeah.
keep it low key.
Okay.
Let's say for example I make $1,000 per year, and then
Right.
$100 goes to tax, and I live in an area where I could afford that apartment, which gives me, which is my paycheck, right?
Right.
And so that city area, the tax I pay is $100. So
Right.
let's say for example, 100 people live there, then I'm pretty bad at math.
100 people live there,
So
so they're
100
getting like
tax.
$1,000 in tax
$1,000
from
in
that
tax,
group
right?
of people, right?
Yeah. So and then that's basically how much they could afford, the city could afford, right? Versus a place where they make $10,000 per year, and it's a better place. So
They collect more taxes, right?
collect more taxes, provide more service. So, and if a person wants to go from $1,000 to $10,000, he has to get a good education, but he can't get that good education because
Right.
of the $100 education that he's getting.
Right.
So it's
But the thing is, right? Sure, maybe the buildings are worse, but
this is-
I
but I'm
feel like
saying,
the education level isn't that far off. And even if it is, right, that actually shows out over time,
what
right?
do you mean?
It is in the best interest for a society to keep everyone happy, right? And governments try their best to do that. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they fail terribly, sometimes they do well. And the entire focus of a government is providing a service to its people and making sure that there's order and regulation that's happening.
But do you think the way that the Khalifa during the Prophet's time, right?
Right.
They did it where they have it's a set amount, 2.5% of the wealth. Zakat goes to everyone
Right.
who are the poor, who
Yeah.
cannot afford it.
I mean, but the thing is, like, don't we have zakat right now? I mean,
No,
if
I'm
you-
saying like,
right,
but this is the thing though. If you go to like Middle Eastern countries, right? The way that zakat, I don't know if, don't quote me on this, I actually not
right,
sure.
no, go ahead.
But did the government itself collect all the zakat and then spread it out?
Wait, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Did zakat did they collect, like as a government, as a Khalifa's ruling, right?
Right.
Did they collect the zakat and then spread it to the countries, to the places that they needed?
So
I don't think they did.
I wouldn't be too sure.
I
either.
wouldn't be sure.
But
But I know that one thing that they did was they collected jizya.
yeah,
Jizya is the tax that they
You're
had to
right.
pay for if you're not a Muslim,
right,
and I think that was kind of thing.
right.
But the way that Islam does is it kind of seems makes sense because 2.5% of your wealth is paid off, and there's an income threshold to that too.
Right.
So,
But I mean, getting back to the point, right, about thresholds and everything, people are in the United States have tax brackets, right? They're within tax brackets, and the higher you go, the higher you pay taxes, right?
but that's not the case though.
No, it is the case though.
But this is the thing. Like, for example, like
Right.
Jeff Bezos pays literally like less
Right,
tax.
but that's because most of his wealth is tied up in stocks. So stock market is an asset that goes up and down based on the market reactions to everything. So you can't charge money on that because it's not like a physical property. It's something that you can get a loan on, or you can show it as a loaning figure, but it isn't physical cash, right? In order for him to use any of that wealth, he would have to sell it, or he would have to get a loan on top of it. And so he can't pay taxes on that, right? That's completely different because it's part of an investing body, right? I want to get it back to the ground where, let's just think about like a doctor, right? He's not Jeff Bezos. He makes good money. A doctor makes good money, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the regular, person, the regular man, the working man, makes $50,000, and the doctor makes $500,000. The doctor pays immensely more tax than the $50,000 man. And people, I believe, under like a $65,000 income limit, don't even pay taxes. They actually get
65?
they actually get money back from the government. So
65K.
yeah, so somewhere around that, like don't quote me on it, but like somewhere around that, they don't even pay taxes, right? But in our society, right, the doctor pays a lot more, and then he doesn't even send his kids to public school. He sends them to private school because he can afford it, right? But the entire purpose of the tax, right, is that you have to consider four things in a nation. It's economics, the economic health of it, the military health of a government, and the social health of a government, right? So are people happy in your nation? right? Is the people who are in, you want to avoid social warfare, social class warfare, right? You don't want to have an uprising, right? You don't want to have governments to be toppled over, right? You don't. So the government's whole job is to be liked in some ways, right? And so taxes, it becomes a difficult thing to kind of address, right? I think in the United States, I think the person who suffers the most from taxes is actually the middle class. We see the constant shrinking of the middle class, and we see the gap between the rich and the poor becoming more and more and more. And our prophet knew this, right? If you think about it from an Islamic standpoint,
Yeah.
we knew that that interest enslaves us. It is slavery. Modern slavery is paying a loan.
I heard one thing that slavery never ended.
Mm-hmm.
It just took a different form.
It took a different form
because of how
right
money could be printed easily and
right.
like people.
Once
could
once Nixon took us off the gold, the gold, what's it called? I forgot the word. But
gold is like it's basically where the money is backed up by a certain resource.
Right. And now
back
no
then
longer
was
is it backed up by gold, but it's a floating system. It floats anywhere depending on the market. We kind of base our thing on oil. So, the reason why for example, like Gaddafi was invaded or Saddam was invaded was because they wanted to put their their oil and sell it on euro and not the dollar. So we kind of base our dollar amount on oil, sort of. We base it on several different things. We base it on the amount of income a nation is
so
making.
I think like that's the issue with BRIC.
Yeah. So, like the thing is, at the end of the day, when we're paying interest, we are enslaved by the bank that we're paying to, right? If we fail, if we go under, we get hurt. What happened in the 2007 financial crisis is the banks were fine. They were inevitably fine. They took a gamble. They played hard to make a lot of money, and nothing happened to them. A few banks went under, but what happened? The U.S. government came in and they protected them, right?
Yeah, because of the FTC.
Right, FTC, the bankruptcy and everything. They helped them out, right? They made sure that the banks would never fail because they knew if the banks failed, that the country would collapse.
I think that's what happened with the Great Depression, right?
Exactly. So they, with that understanding, are banks working in the best interest of the people they're serving? Absolutely not. But at the same time, you have to take your education in your own hands. There's so many sources out there. There's Investopedia. There's so many things that you could do when you're to understand what you're buying. I always say to people who are going out for a loan, go to multiple people, multiple bankers, talk to them, see what interest rate they can offer you, see what they can provide you. Go out to other people. You need to do your own research. You need to figure it out. Don't just listen to somebody telling you, because if that person is giving you free education without, anything, I think they're just trying to like hide the truth from you and keep whatever is there to convince you to make them money, right? This is what real estate agents did. They inflated the market because they told their clients that it was going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. That the market is in a gully, and that's why it's something, or this and that. There's always 100 excuses to make up for whatever wrongs is happening right in front of our eyes, right? I think a lot of us are controlled by consumerism and greed, right? We're always out there trying to make like the next buck, and we use so many different ways. We say, "Oh, God is first," but then we put our greed first, actually, right? Yeah. So who are we lying to? We're lying to God. We're lying to ourselves, right? And I think the most important thing is just like, just avoid the greed. Avoid the greed.
So if, let's say, for example, right now in the housing market, right, it's going up. Like, it's definitely right on the rise again after COVID and everything hit. But for example, a 2-bedroom house, which was at market, I believe, close to 1.6K per month, costs like 2.8K now in this area, at least. So for someone to live in an apartment with 2.8K per month, the idea is it's better to buy a house where you're paying a loan for 2.8K a month.
Right. So this is the thing.
So like,
right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So the idea is, as a middle class family that follows Islam, does not want to do interest and everything.
Right.
How would you suggest them to buy something like that? Because obviously the housing market is on the rise, and it's easier and it's better because
it's better to take a loan than But if you're questioned about faith, right? There's something like if you were questioning about it, is this halal?
Then don't do it, because there is a hadith about
because
it.
Halal is inherently halal. You know what's right and what's wrong. Your body inside has a clock, has a system that knows what is wrong from right. Maybe like God is only creating a strict system to know what is right and what is wrong. What you do right will feel better. Suffering that we feel, right? That we feel that God tests us, and God tests those who have greater abundance. You make a lot of money, all of a sudden there's so many things, haram things that you can buy. You can buy alcohol, you can buy cigarettes, you can buy this, weed, whatever, right? You can get an interest loan, you can live lavishly, right?
I think the idea is like whenever you get something, Allah tests you with everything that no man's
right.
And only Allah tests those
your wealth becomes a snake that bites you.
That is definitely, inevitably, that is the end goal. Like,
yeah.
And Allah said that He also tests everyone, right? And specifically, He tests those who He likes.
Right.
So I guess like,
I imagine that if God likes you, if God favors you, right? Imagine like if we were stuck still in Bangladesh or whatever country that you come from, like as an immigrant, you've heard stories of how tough it was back there. You come over here, right? Life is significantly better, right?
Yeah, at least it's like.
But you can take a halal route and you can be fine, right? God didn't tell you, hey, leave Bangladesh or leave this country and come to the United States where there's a lot more haram going around. There's haram interests, haram this, haram that, haram food all around you, telling you to, hey, eat the haram food. It tastes better, right? Then you made that choice to come here. You're being tested much further because you took that gain, right? Every gain has a con, and you have to be aware of it. Yes, you're a family who's paying $2,800 for rent to somebody. Or you can pay $2,800 on a loan and own that house. You own that asset for your entire life.
Because that is like some of the mindset with a lot of people.
No. It's the logical move to make.
Yeah.
Right? But what is the effects of interest? I don't think people understand. Like, we understand eating pig is haram, and we know that the pig is disgusting. Every Muslim, you bring a pig around them, they will like run away, right? They will run away. But you bring interest in front of them, and they're fine. They're like okay with it. Why is that? Because they don't see the entire effect of interest. They don't see how disgusting it is. How disgusting it is that you enslave another human being. You will leave them poor for the rest of their life.
Because the idea of interest is basically to keep the
destruction of society. It is the destruction of society. It is to make people poorer. It's to keep the people who are rich, right? And I'm not trying to like ensue a crass warfare, right? Because I'm sure there are people who pay their interest fine and they get their house and whatever, right? But 30 years, if you're buying a house at the age of 30, by the time you die, maybe you don't even finish paying that loan.
That is true.
Right?
And it's a burden to another generation, though.
Not even a burden, but a burden to yourself. You died having qarza, having debt, having, like somebody owns you, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
having debt. Because I believe all the tax, not all the tax,
everything.
all the interest and everything, they come back as a snake and they bite you in the grave.
Yeah, right. So like
there is a lot of hadith about it.
Right. But the thing is, right, think about it from just a moral standpoint, from a social standpoint, how it feels to enslave a bunch of people, and you help that system by becoming a part of it. You help the system by becoming a part of it. You pay the interest, or you charge the interest, or you help somebody else pay that interest, and you're all part of that system. That system that Allah said from the start that riba was haram. He made it very strict. Very, very easily he said, riba is haram. There's no way around it. Pig is haram. Eating haram food is haram. Adultery is haram. All these things are so specific. How much more specific does it have to be for people to understand it? But they will ignore everything and then they'll be fine. Like, you see a lot of guys, they'll they'll eat haram food, or they'll keep away from haram food, but they'll drink alcohol. Is one more haram than the other? No, they're equally, maybe not equally, but they're haram. Haram is haram, halal is halal. If we keep these strict understandings, and not always should we bleed into nuance, right? Do we need a fabulous house? I don't think we need a fabulous house. I think we should be grateful that God gave us these hands, these eyes. We have food when we want to eat food. We have water when we want to drink water. Under the hot sun, we have water, right? Look at the kids in Palestine. Like, they suffering so much. And all these interviews, and you have when people are suffering, go to these countries and they do interviews with the kids and they ask them, what do you want? All they want is their father. All they want is to see their brother again. All they want is a little food because they're hungry. Yeah, and we want fast cars that go 300 miles per hour. We want this and that. I don't think we, as a society, we're becoming less self-aware about the things that are happening around us, and we're becoming sick. We're gluttony. People are eating too much and they're getting sick. Then they get sick. Then they have to rely on the healthcare system.
I think the idea is it goes back to what I said in my previous podcast, where it's like Islam is a way of life.
Yeah,
and it's just not like a methodology where you follow. It's like not 9/11 bombers and have later his ideas, mentality.
Right.
Or go like and also like my friend has a saying that a lot of people believe that Islam is spread through swords and like a lot of bloodshed, versus how Islam was actually spread is not through that. It was spread through actual peace and and stuff, like especially with the annexation of Palestine and Jerusalem at that time. They went there peacefully. They didn't have any fights or anything. The Christian popes, I believe the popes are the ones that were there at that time. The only thing that they did was they went in. They just said that the way that you guys deal with us is so peaceful and so nice, and we don't want any bloodshed on this day, and we will sign a contract with you saying that any Christian or any Muslim who lives in this land is free to live, and no church will be destroyed or nothing will be destroyed. So it was a peace treaty kind of thing.
Right.
But the one condition that they had, like going back to like the Palestine thing, but is they restricted the it was the Christians. They said that we restrict the entrance of the Jews in that land. So it's like, you guys could go look it up. It's a Jerusalem contract. If you search up Jerusalem contract during the Ottoman time period, it shows up, and there's a whole history behind it, and it's credited and it's like legit documents. It's not like fake. Basically, when they entered Jerusalem and then they signed the contract, and it was a peaceful contract. They didn't even have any problems. It's such a wonderful story, but that contract is the reason why we have this.
Right.
So the history of Palestine and stuff, like, I know we're going off topic a bit, but the history of Palestine, literally what's happening right now between Palestine and Israel started back then.
Right.
It's a wonderful story. Not a lot of people know about this. No outlet. The way I heard the story is the history of it is a person who was who's a close friend of mine. He told me about it. He's a historian. He's mainly a historian that studies Middle Eastern history. But yeah, the way that the scheme worked out, where British came in, like they had like the main play in this.
Going off that in history, right? The book that I'm writing right now about the 1971 war, I think we're overlooking, like, I think the world overlooked that genocide at some point, right? And it actually established how we view genocides in an interesting way. So just to give you, do you know the history of the 71 Liberation War, or do you want me to just give a quick rundown?
Just give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, so during so it basically starts off with Ayub Khan, who is the prime minister of West Pakistan or the entire Pakistan at the time. So
that's when there was the East Pakistan, the
West Pakistan,
at
right?
that
After
time.
1945, after India becomes.
And this was also because of
You're right.
British.
Yeah, of the British, yeah, interestingly enough. So what happens is you have a country of West Pakistan, which is right now just regular Pakistan, and then you have East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh.
now.
Ayub Khan is the prime minister during that time. He essentially is thrown out of power because he is giving too much power to the 22 industrial families in Pakistan. He industrializes Pakistan a lot, but the literacy level and the power given to the people who aren't the elites is not shown. And so these students basically have a bunch of protest. They protest because of the inequality, essentially. These protests starts in Rawalpindi, goes into Karachi, Lahore, and then starts in Dhaka, right? And Ayub Khan is basically thrown out of power. He resigns from his post, and Yahya Khan comes in. Yahya Khan was, by then, the brigadier general of the Pakistan military, and he comes into power. When he comes into power, his job is to make sure that whoever the next prime minister is voted, he is voted correctly. He's just basically seeing over what's happening. Pakistan has this long, I guess, history of the government intermingling with their military, and it's interesting, right? I won't get into it, but what happens is that Yahya Khan comes into power. Now there's two sides. There's Bhutto, and there's Sheikh Mujib. Sheikh Mujib represents the Awami League, right? And Bhutto represents the Pakistan's People Party, the PPP. And what happens is that Sheikh Mujib actually wins majority of the votes. If you look at the West and East Pakistan population, there's more people that live in East Pakistan, even though it's I believe, a smaller country. And now they're drafting the constitution and they're trying to figure out who should be prime minister. Even though they voted and he won, right? The main thing is that West Pakistan is where a lot of the military power is, and East Pakistan doesn't have that much military power, not a lot of influence, and so they don't want to be controlled by a smaller state. Imagine if you were in New York State and you wanted to be controlled by Montana, for example, right? There's going to be some discrepancy between them. Sheikh Mujib, in no way did he want to secede from West Pakistan. He wanted to be part of the Pakistan system. So they drafted 6 points that they wanted, right? They wanted a different treasury system, their own like little military. They wanted their own separate funding, federal system, their own government. So it's kind of like you have your local government and then you have a federal government. The main Pakistan would be the federal government. Sheikh Mujib would have his own like sort of state government, right? So you have two different major big states, right, with many states within them, and they wanted to have that system, right? He wanted to have that system. Yahya Khan did not want to budge. He didn't want that system. He wanted Bhutto to be in power, and then why he wanted Bhutto to be in power is so the military could have power, right? The military does not want to give up its power, and essentially they have these negotiations that go on for months. In the middle of it, there's the ambassador to Bangladesh, to Pakistan, is a man named Archer Blood. He's in the middle trying to see how negotiations are going, and Sheikh Mujib tells them, oh, things are going fine. Things are not, in fact, going fine. From the West Pakistan side, Yahya Khan is furious. He is quoted to call them that these black bastards will never control us. So this is what the view is from the West Pakistan side. This is how they view the people in Bangladesh. They view these people as black bastards, because their skin is a little darker. And so
when does the genocide start?
So the genocide starts, what happens essentially is their meetings never come to anything, right? And so West Pakistan starts Operation Searchlight. What is very interesting about how this operation starts is that Yahya Khan realized things were not going to come his way, and so he was going to use military power. And he had it planned out. During the night, he had all of his military officials come to him. They sat down, they created a list, essentially, of people who they should target. And Operation Searchlight was 100% a thought-out genocide. Because what's funny, what's amazingly funny, it's disgusting, is that Yahya Khan was drunk when he made that call. He was drinking. He was known to be a heavy drinker. He was drinking a lot, and he's like, you know what? Whatever. We're gonna invade East Pakistan. They send over their military, and they begin Operation Searchlight. Essentially, what the Pakistan military is doing is oppressing the educated class and the elite of Bangladesh. They're looking at people, it's mainly students who are doing the Awami League, the promotion to make people come out to vote. It was a bunch of young people who went out to the streets, say, come vote for the Awami League. You want a Bangladeshi prime minister? You want an East Pakistan prime minister? Vote for Awami League. They went out in the streets. And so what does the Pakistani military do? It focuses on destroying these students, killing these students, oppressing them. They focused on oppressing Hindus. It was a majority of the things that they did. Oppressing anybody who had powers, right? So if you're, for example, my great-grandfather was the chairman of his town. He had to flee his town because the Pakistani military came. They found one of his sons, one of my great-uncles, and they left him nearly murdered. They hung him upside down on a tree, and they beat him for 2 days. To this day, he still has PTSD from that entire encounter, right? So the Pakistani military, in estimates, the Pakistani government only admits to 300,000 people that they killed.
That's still a lot, though.
But the real number, or whatever the number that the Bangladesh government, the UN agrees with, is 3 million people were killed. And several more than that were fled from their homes, and they came into India, into Kolkata, and into parts of India, Assam, right? And they all came over there. They became refugees, essentially, because the Pakistan government was systematically killing and raping women, killing children, women, anybody, students, educated people, because the educated people, once you kill the educated people of a country, that country falls apart socially, right? And that was what their target was. We want to crush Bangladesh so that for 100 years they never even think about revolting, having a civil war, having a breakup. And essentially what happens is that India at first, when they're hearing about all this, they have their intelligence, they have their something called the RAW, which is their CIA or FBI. Yeah, it's like the special agency. Right. And so they're getting reports all over, and they're thinking, okay, Pakistan and West Pakistan and East Pakistan, they're going to figure this out without any military intervention. They didn't even think about that there was going to be military intervention, because it is in the best interest of West Pakistan to have both East Pakistan and West Pakistan together. Why? Because their enemy at that time, or their greatest threat, is India. Yeah. And Bangladesh and Pakistan happen to be here, and here's India. So they have two fronts. That's a very dangerous situation for India. Yeah. But however, India wanted, you knew that it's better if they just stay together. They don't have any wars. They don't have anything. But once all these refugees are filing into India, they're having a crisis now, a refugee crisis. Yeah. They realized that the Pakistan military would not stop. And the reason why they would not stop is because they had a deal with President Nixon. At the time, President Nixon wanted to forge a relationship with China, with Mao Zedong or whoever was in power during that time. Pakistan was a great friend to the United States in helping that deal come across, where they can meet each other in China. And that picture of Nixon on the Great Wall of China, right, with his wife. That meeting would not have happened without the help of Yahya Khan. And Nixon is quoted calling Yahya Khan, the person who led to like 3 million deaths, an honorable man, because he was helping them. And so the U.S. government, Pakistan had a problem with their IMF. They ran out of money in their treasury or something like that. And essentially they asked the U.S., oh, we need help. Can you give us $50 million from the IMF? The IMF is the International Monetary Fund. It gives third world countries money, right? Now, if you're waging a genocide or a war in a different country, should you be getting money from the IMF? No, but the U.S. is one of the big guys in getting it through, right?
It's pretty similar to
yeah. So they believe, oh, we're going to get 50 million, we're going to be fine, whatever, right?
So what does this...
So the whole thing is this, basically, right? you have 50 million of funding coming through, right? And the Pakistan government believes that, okay, we can wage this war and we can afford it, right? And if we can afford it, we can continue doing this genocide, right? And they're in a position where they believe that they can continue having these crimes against humanity. And so this war continues on. It is not until the Indian government interferes in the end, and it's this whole political debacle between the Soviet Union, between China, between the US. You know, Kissinger was meeting Yahya Khan, telling him, hey, you guys, everybody just wants the whole conflict to end because it looks bad for Pakistan. And later on, this Pakistani journalist, he is sent to East Pakistan to show that, oh, everything's fine in East Pakistan. People are just, they're walling out, He comes back and he sees the atrocities and he flees to England. He flees to England and he posts that there's an actual genocide going on. And it's disgusting and it's terrible. And it's due to those efforts being made and people, making the effort of donating money to Bangladesh to help those refugees, helping those people. India later on joining the war and helping Bangladesh. And that's how, at some point, the Pakistan government realized, hey, we can't afford this revolution anymore. We need to get out. And that's why they left.
So how are you writing the book about this
So
stuff?
I have a great love for literature. I have a great love for film. I can't make a movie because, movies, if you want to make a movie, you need money, right? But I can definitely write. So writing is free. And so I wanted to write a story, a sort of novel, encapsulating, the reactions to a genocide. Like, how can a person wake up and think about killing so many people, harming so many people, and at the same time going back home to their family?
So it's like the idea of like,
I guess the duality of man. It is, I think, in genocide and in war and in the worst conflicts in the world, you can realize what it really means to be human.
I think like this, I forgot where I heard it exactly, but I believe it was in a podcast called The Knowledge Project. So this person was saying that when the Cold War was happening, every president was like, I had the code to the nukes, right? So I think that what they were saying is that instead of the president actually having the code of the thing, you have a volunteer who has the code, right? And he swallows it, and he keeps it in him.
Yeah.
And when the president feels like he has to use that code,
Right.
the first thing he has to do is kill a human before he
Right.
actually uses the nuke.
Exactly.
So the idea is like, would you want to kill that person? So because what happens is when people like in that time, right, when you press on, it's like when you hit the code and then you send it, you don't actually see or feel the
Right.
pain that the other person feels.
Right. I
You
think,
just do it.
especially in the modern era where we're bombarded with so much information about all the suffering that's happening around the world, we become numb to it. We become so numb to it that we don't realize how bad things really are. And we don't really care about it. Joseph Stalin has this really jarring quote where he says that the death of one man is a tragedy and the death of 500 men is news. And it's just a statistic. And I think it's coming to that point where we're disconnected from the reality. We're so numbed down by, consumerism, by wealth, by chasing wealth, that we're not focused on what it means to be human, what it feels like, the suffering that we feel, right? We're disconnected from it. We're always trying to run away from it. There's this man named Victor Vogel. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was a psychologist. He wrote that all the suffering that we feel, right? You and me, we all feel suffering, right? Every individual feels some sort of suffering. But we all have different physical bodies and different mental bodies. So imagine if each of us was a different type of glass jar, right? And suffering is a gas. Whatever that gas is fills that entire jar completely. It completely consumes us. Yeah. And so whatever our suffering is feels like the most suffering. Whatever somebody else's suffering is, we can't even understand it. We can't even calculate it because it completely consumes them. I think at this point, I feel like as human beings, we need to start to understand one each other. We need to focus on the deeper self of ourselves. We need to slow down in the day and sit down and think about what's really happening, the bigger picture. And I think a lot of us are hiding from it because we're scared. We're scared to really get intact with it.
So like what are some goals you seem to have in your life because you said that you are a author, you are a real estate agent, and you are a
budget analyst,
analyst. So what are some goals you have?
I guess the most important goal that I have, or one of the goals I have, is definitely writing this book. I'm in the process of writing it, and inshallah, I want to publish it and everything, and I want just, more than even making a profit off of it, I'd rather just, I want like one person to just pick it up and read the whole thing back to front, and I guess take away some knowledge and some history and some understanding on how maybe I see the world, how maybe the entire human condition. Like, I feel like that is the most important thing I want to take away from someone. I think, our ideas are immaterial, so they last beyond us.
Something like you want to instill because a book is a perspective of someone.
Yeah.
That's how I always look at a book. A book is like, if you want to understand that person's perspective or that person's idea, I always go on to that book, like you read it. So I think like the thing that you want to do is something similar, where you want to instill your idea in that book and then sell it to other people. I mean, sell it in a way that they actually understand and they look at it and they read it. It's not
I really want
monetized.
It's basically, I want people to, like, when you're reading a book, I feel like it's different from other types of content. When you're scrolling on the phone, you're just moving from one thing to another, right? In a book, you're actually sitting down and you're thinking about those ideas. You're thinking about what's happening. You're imagining it. You're running it through your perspective, right? A film or something, the nuance can be specific to that director, how he's making you think about it. But in a book, like in the Quran, in the Torah, in the Bible, in the New Testament, Old Testament, like, there are ideas that you think about and you sit and you ponder over what it means to be human. Yeah. I think it's really important that we become a society. I heard about this interesting quote in Urdu, but I'll say it in English, is that, a society is failing when there are less libraries and more restaurants. So instead of feeding our mind, we're just feeding our gut. Gluttony. That's what we're running into. We're so focused on consumerism, consuming, getting bigger and bigger, that we forget what it really means to be a person.
So like, what are some type of mindsets that you think you need?
I think
you have
right. I think we all struggle with a form of evil, right? I think that when you are favored by God, when you have some blessings, that shaitan makes more of an effort to get in your ear and tell you, hey, it's okay to do this, this, and this, even if it's wrong. And it's whether I listen to that, or do I listen to the person who brought me to the party, who got me here, which is God, right? Who gave me the hands, gave me the arms and everything. Shaitan doesn't have the power to give you anything. He doesn't have any power. The only thing he does is that he can whisper in your ear, constantly telling you, hey, do this, do that. Think negatively about this. Think bad about that. For every time that he whispers in your ear, you have to say 5 times more, hey, God gave me this, this, and this. So get out of here. Just like a real, F off moment to shaitan.
Definitely don't say that. Mine says, I'm grateful for what I have.
Right.
I don't want more. But if I want more, I go in a way that's right and halal.
Yeah.
Instead of like haram.
Yeah. It's just like, focus on what's halal. Focus on morality. I don't want to go to sleep, or I don't, let's say we don't know when we're going to die. I don't want to die tomorrow and feel like I negatively impacted this world. And for all the sins I've done, like, we've all committed sin, I feel like it's kind of like a redemption. Like, redeeming yourself through what? Redeeming yourself by providing value to those who you love, taking care of those who you love, bringing more to society than what you took from society,
I think that value providing thing is like something that a lot of people expect. Because instead of even like Patrick Bet David, I believe you know him.
No.
Alright, he's a pretty smart guy. He's not, the way that he says and explains stuff is that it's not like the way that you're supposed to be is have people that provide value to this community and like actually provide something that matters. Instead of like it's not it's not about money always. It's not about money.
No.
It's not about the person's looks. It's about the value that they provide and the experience and the maturity and how much of a big impact that the person can bring to the table.
Right.
That's definitely something that's like not a lot of people think about it. Not a lot of people consider, but it's something there.
I think Thomas Sowell actually says something similar to that. Somebody asked him, "How do you survive in this society, in this world?" And he says that you should acquire skills that make you valuable in the market, and that's how you go forward in life. If you want to be successful, I think that's one of the things you take on. And I think, just attaining knowledge, being grateful for what you have, and I think those are the things, like having your moral compass be set right.
I think that's definitely it. So what are some, if you were to go back 3 years, right?
Right.
What would be one advice that you would give to yourself?
I think one advice that I probably give to myself is to value the things that I have. I don't think I valued enough of the things I have. I don't think, I wish that I could go back and focus more on my education, focus more on the time I spent. Like every second that goes away, I feel like when you were younger, you see time as something that you're looking forward to that person, to becoming like an adult. Like when you're a kid, you have to go to sleep at a certain time, you have to do things that your parents tell you, and so you want to be an adult so you can do your own thing, right? And then when you become an adult, then you're like, okay, but in the future I want to do this and this, and then you realize there's more restrictions in life. And so I think when you're a child, time kind of moves slowly because you're like getting older takes time, right? Yeah. Getting to that maturity takes time. Getting to that point in life takes time. And then, but right now, when you look back on your past, everything is like a moment. Everything's just a second, Yeah, time just moving like forward, and you just feel like, okay, now I'm 23, tomorrow's not like, you wake up and you're already 24, and it's like, what have I done with this time? And I don't, if I could go back, I'd probably tell that person, hey, look, you wasted time here and here and here. What's it for? In the end, what do you have to show for the time you took? The time, you were gifted this body that, mashallah, you have the ability to walk, to move, to be able to see, to speak. This is something that is a gift. Why waste it on something that's stupid, And I think I wasted a lot of times and I did things that weren't right and I regret it. But one thing I would tell myself is don't do anything that you would feel like you would have a regret for. Do things that would make you feel like, hey, I did it. Even if I failed, I did it and don't have any regrets for it because I learned something on the way. I guess that's what I would tell myself.
All right, thank you for spending time here and sharing your wisdom about
it was great.
Finance and real estate and hopefully your book.
Yeah.
We'll be glad to read it and also promote it for you if you need.
Right.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great.
And
I just want to tell everyone that I am a real estate agent. If you do need advice on real estate or anything of that nature, feel free to reach me out. My handle's Ahmed.properties on Instagram. You can always reach out. Exactly.
We'll definitely put it down in the video. Video comments.
I'd be glad to educate anybody on how to buy a house, how to get their first house ownership, and guide them through the entire way. My background in finance and just my knowledge overall. And I'm glad to be here, and it's great meeting you, man.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us at More Heart to Mic, produced by More Studios. Definitely make sure to follow us on Instagram, leave a subscribe, and also like. And please share your thoughts on in the comments.